Are you running a construction business or just doing a job that owns you? After talking to a lot of contractors all across the country, I've noticed something that's pretty clear. There is a pattern that separates the guys who stay stuck and the ones who scale and build real freedom with their construction businesses and create a construction business that doesn't rely on them to keep their projects and their business in general moving forward. So in this video, I'm actually going to break down 3 levels of a contractor's evolution and how you can move from wherever you are to the next one. So if you're tired of spinning your wheels and if you're ready to build a construction business that works for you, then you'll want to keep listening and watching. And if you don't know who I am, my name is Jesse Lane. I started a construction business, J Lane Construction, that I scaled, grew it to 8 figures in revenue. And now I've started a software company called Structure. You could check it out at structure.com. You could literally get started for free. And it has every tool that your construction business needs to scale and automate your construction company. So if you want to learn more about Structure, just go to structure.com. You could look around a little bit, get started for free. Check it out. It has everything your construction business needs, and we're always continually adding new features. It's getting really fun and exciting. But let's talk about how you can evolve as a contractor and go through these different phases, and there will be a bonus phase after the 3rd one. So the contractors who grow fast don't just find ways to improve their craft, they evolve how they think, how they lead, how they build their company. Once you understand what stage you're in and then what's next, you can stop guessing and start growing on purpose. So level 1 is the hustler. Every contractor, typically every contractor, starts here. You're the one answering the phone, you're doing the bids, you're picking up materials, you're swinging the hammer, and you're chasing the next check, all in the same day. You don't have systems, you have instincts. And since you're early in the stages of your construction business, those instincts can actually mislead you into focusing on the wrong things. You don't have a team, or maybe you have like 1 or 2 people, maybe even you have 5 or 10 people, but it doesn't equate to much of an organized team, right? And honestly, at this stage, hustle is the superpower. It's what keeps things alive, but it's also what will eventually burn you out. So let me take you back a couple years when I was there. I remember there's this one week when I first launched J Lane Construction. I was in the first couple years and I was on 3 different job sites in 2 different counties, trying to finish a punch list while driving to a supplier that closed at 4:30. I was texting a client 1 minute and cutting trim the next. And I thought, man, like, is this what building a business looks like? But deep down, I knew this wasn't sustainable. I was tired, my profits were low, and nothing worked unless I was the one doing it or managing it or whatever. And that's the trap of the hustler stage. It feels like progress because you're doing so much yourself, but it's just kind of controlled chaos. There's no schedule transparency, right? There's no client updates unless you send them. There's no estimates unless you spend all of your evenings building them, right? And stopping everything to write them at 9 p.m. instead of hanging with your wife, watching a movie, or being with your kids or whatever. You're doing everything at this stage because you don't trust anyone else yet. And you don't have a structure, no pun intended, or structure software that lets you step back. So your goal this week to pick one task, get a structure account, build a text process and a checklist, and maybe even add a Loom video or something like that. If it's like something done on your computer, you can add a little video, clicking through, this is exactly how you do it. Then you want to assign this responsibility to someone else. This is the very thing that most hustlers who stay as hustlers don't do. They say they can't delegate because no one can do it right. But what you really lack isn't the right person, it's just the process for testing that trust. This one simple move reveals if the issue is skill, clarity, or control. And it starts by breaking the habit of you being the answer to everything. You can't be the answer to everything. Well, you actually are the answer to everything, but you through your systems that you build, right? The checklist is the answer for everything. The written text process is the answer to everything. Or if you put a video on that SOP page, then that's the answer to everything. They all work together on this one process page. So you're not completely, if you do this one process, stepping totally out yet, but you're stepping back just enough to see what needs to change for your business to grow without you glued to it. And this is the first step towards becoming a real manager, which is someone who leads the team instead of being the team. And this is level 2, the manager. Once you've gotten out of the field a little, you've hired some help, you've put a few processes in place. You move into the stage that I like to call the manager stage. This is where a lot of contractors also get stuck because you stop doing everything yourself, but now you're managing everyone else. And let me tell you from personal experience, this stage is sneaky. It feels like progress, but it actually is still a trap. If you're a construction business owner, if you're a chief operations officer, perfect. This is literally who you are. But if you're a construction business owner at this stage, you've got a crew, you're booked out, you're making money, but you're still the guy kind of holding it all together, right? You're still managing the people doing the thing. And your job is to ultimately keep them accountable, keep them responsible, make sure nothing gets mixed. And even at this stage, it can still be exhausting. And this was me year 2 or 3 or so of J-Lane Construction when I was growing my construction company. We were, growing fast, getting solid projects, bigger projects. And I had a great team on paper, but I was still working insane hours. I remember there's this one week and I was supposed to be on vacation with my family. I was supposed to be unplugged, but on the second day of the vacation, I was on the phone in the hallway trying to walk my project manager through a change order. I was, texting a client who had just had one little quick question. I was emailing a vendor who missed a material delivery and I was trying to fix it. And I was still getting texts from my project manager and I was still getting calls from my superintendent. And I was still getting some questions from my office manager because I was ultimately the one managing all of these people. So this is the manager stage, right? You've hired some people, but you are still the one with all the answers. So everything still kind of runs through you. So you're not really the best manager because you're not fully empowering them in their role. So that could be one thing you tweak. But the ultimate thing is you're still the manager. You don't have someone managing for you. So how do you evolve from this stage? You start building leaders, not just helpers. This means defining clear roles and responsibilities. Like I always say, you're like, Jess, I get it. Creating systems for decision making, delegating outcomes, not just tasks, right? Giving your team the tools to track and execute without relying on you. When I got serious about building all of these things, that's when I started elevating myself into the next phase, which I'm about to talk about. And I had weekly scorecards so my project managers and every role knew what success looked like, right? I had frameworks that they could make smart decisions with without asking me first. I just heard about the decisions after the fact. And I had project dashboards now inside of Structure so I could see where everything stood across my whole company without having to actually jump in to every conversation. And that's when things started to change. Since I wasn't the bottleneck anymore, I started to feel like the actual owner. So level 2, the manager, is where you make the leap from control to clarity. And once you do that, you're ready to go to level 3 and start thinking like a CEO, which is level 3, the CEO. If the manager stage is about holding things together, the CEO stage is about building something that can stand on its own. And this is the level where you shift from managing people and problems to leading the strategy of your company, the vision, the core values, and building better systems. You're no longer in the weeds every day. You're not chasing down materials and double checking framing and making sure your project manager built the schedule. You've built a leadership team that runs the day-to-day, and your role becomes about direction, decision-making, and growth. But here's the hard part. That move from manager to CEO isn't about doing more. It's actually, any guesses, about doing less of the wrong things. I think maybe around like year 5 or 6 of J-Lane Construction, we had hit 8 figures in revenue. I had superintendents, office staff, and a couple solid PMs, and I had an estimator. From the outside, it looked like I had made it, but behind the scenes, I was still jumping into operations way too often. I was still putting out fires when projects got off track. I was personally reviewing every estimate that went out, tracking all the details, reviewing the project schedules, looking at some subcontracts just to make sure everything's flowing. It was a lot, right? And I felt like people really couldn't make decisions without me. I remember this one week we had 3 jobs, all with major issues, right? One had weather delays or inspection holdups or mistakes by our subcontractors. And instead of my team handling it, I found myself dragged back into every situation, right? It's when I realized that I had delegated tasks, but I hadn't fully installed the accountability systems to fully trust the machine that I thought I had built, but I hadn't built a good enough machine at that point. So I pulled back a little bit and asked myself, what do I need to do here? What does my business need to run without me in every single role, or at least managing every single role, right? So that was the beginning of what would eventually become Structur Software. I built, dashboards where I could see all the jobs at one glance. I installed SOPs for every workflow, which was then at that point a Squarespace website, which you probably heard me talk about a few years ago. I had the Squarespace website with drop downs for each role. I started requiring weekly check-ins for each PM. I built bullet points for each, process, which is now the checklists inside of Structur, because in the Squarespace website, I couldn't actually have them check it off. So there was no accountability. And the Squarespace website didn't have scorecard ability or anything like that. It was just a bunch of random like Google Sheets and spreadsheets, and it was a little chaotic. So that's literally the reason why I built Structur. So it's all in one place. But even back then, with the Squarespace website, little by little, I stopped being the bottleneck. I stopped being needed to complete all of these different processes, all these different tasks. I started leading with more clarity. I started using more data to drive my decisions. And I started creating more space to think and plan and innovate, right? And I stopped holding the business together and I started leading it forward in a much better way. So this CEO stage is where you hire a manager. Maybe you even have a CFO and a COO. If you are the CEO, then your job ultimately is to not check in with your estimator and your project manager and your office manager and your superintendents. It's to check in with your COO, your chief operating officer, and let them manage the company and you can lead. That's the unlock for you, right? And you started from the hustler. You were doing all core 7 roles, but eventually you get those roles filled, and then you were the COO as the manager, and then you get a COO, and then you can lead them as the CEO. And that's essentially what I'm saying here is you level up as time goes on and you learn more, and then you can have a less stressful life running a construction company. This is the stage where you start to get your time back and you can finally take a vacation without your phone buzzing every 5 minutes. And maybe you can even explore some other investments and stuff like that. Maybe you want to get into real estate or do something like that. Maybe you can even coach a couple other younger contractors and help them, everything like that. But here's the kicker. These are the 3 stages that just bring you to being a great CEO. But here's a bonus stage, the founder. And this isn't for everybody. If you really, really, really want to step back and think super big picture, or if you want to maybe do another type of venture, the founder would be kind of like the next stage. It's a bonus stage. There might be a bonus stage after that that's like selling the company, which you might choose to do. If you're the founder, you're no longer the primary driver of business day to day, right? You're not managing your COO anymore. And you're definitely not in the field. You're outside of any sort of critical path. At this level, your job isn't to manage projects or lead meetings. It's strictly to set the vision, guide the culture, and just make very high level decisions when necessary. Everything else runs through your team because you have a CEO and you have a COO. And again, this is just an optional bonus step. When you're at this stage, it's actually really nice. Most of the text you're gonna get is, hey, tea time at 1:20, are you in? It's like a few years ago, I would have laughed at this, right? Because how could I just leave in the middle of the day without things completely falling apart, especially on a Monday morning when the team is scrambling to get all the projects started and get the week going, and it's just absolute chaos in the office and on the field, right? And I have tried to pretend like I was in this stage before, and I don't want you to make this mistake of trying to act like your team's just going to handle it when you haven't set up all of your systems in place and you haven't gotten a Structur account and built all your SOPs, and your team knows exactly, because of the checklists and the written processes and the video overviews of your SOPs and everything like that. If there's no weekly scorecard for each person on your team to really track their progress and hold them accountable, then you haven't built a system or a machine that is ready for you to step out. So only once you've built those things across all 7 core departments, marketing, sales, estimating, project management, superintendents, office management, and bookkeeping, then you aren't ready to fully step out. But once you've dialed in those 7 core roles, right, departments in your construction business, then you've brought on a COO and maybe a CFO, but not necessarily totally necessary. Depends how big of a company you are. And you've even brought on, and it could be a great CEO, but if you want to go to the founder level, if you've brought on an amazing CEO to run, and then you just check in with your C-suite on a weekly meeting, a monthly meeting, a bi-monthly meeting, whatever you want to do, that's when you can truly exit your company and be a founder or maybe even sell it, right? Which is a whole nother level, which is kind of like the end game. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Definitely check out Structur if you want to get started completely for free. Just go to structur.com. Also leave a link in the first comment and the description below. And I think it would really help you with your construction company. We're always adding more features. And if you have any suggestions for Structur, just message us in the live chat. We would love to hear from you because we're kind of building this together. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you can get to the founder level. And we will see you in a future YouTube video. Peace.